Welcome to the Pregnancy Help Podcast. I'm Christine Grimmett, along with Heartbeat International's President Jor-El Godsey. And today we welcome Lauren Muzyka from Sidewalk Advocates for Life to talk with us about how their sidewalk outreach is centered on a compassionate, love-first approach, meeting women with care in a difficult moment. And today we'll talk about how that approach works, how advocates are trained to serve women in a changing abortion landscape, and how sidewalk advocates and pregnancy centers can work together more effectively. Before we begin, I want to remind our listeners that Heartbeat's annual conference is quickly approaching. We hope you can join us in Cincinnati, Ohio at the end of March for this amazing event of training and of networking as we celebrate this year's theme, The Power of Love. We also have our virtual conference happening that same week, so there are many opportunities for you to join us. Check out more information in the show notes. Jor-El and Lauren, great to have you here, and I'll turn things on over to you.
Thanks, Christine. Well, it's always a pleasure to have Lauren with us. There's a beauty and a wonder about what Lauren has really molded the movement, and particularly on the sidewalk. And I want to get into that. But I'm reminded of a quote from one of the Shakespeare plays. It says, "First, kill all the lawyers." Well, it's a good thing we didn't do that, because Lauren is a lawyer, but she has taken that training and that skill and mixed it with really the love of God. This whole power of love is part of our, not just our conference, but it's really part of the landscape of Heartbeat International, and what I know is part of the Sidewalk Advocates for Life. There's a tremendous story that I don't want to go any further until we've told the story again, which is, Lauren, you have really helped revolutionize pro-life sidewalk outreach in a very particular and intentional way, and it really frames what Sidewalk Advocates is all about. And I just want you to tell that story again for us.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, again, such a pleasure to be with you guys today. And to all of our pregnancy help partners out there, God bless you. Thank you for everything that you're doing. We could not do what we do on the sidewalk without you. We're a team for life. We all need each other. And onward and upward, right, to saving lives and gradually ending abortion through the power of love. So what we have sought to do in Sidewalk Advocates for Life, by God's grace at this juncture in history, we're America's largest sidewalk outreach organization. And in short, we train, equip, and support people just like you, just like the people who are watching and listening to this. And our prerogative is to be the hands and feet of Jesus at the darkest places in our communities. If it's true that abortion is the greatest cause of death in the history of the world, then it's also true that the sidewalk is the greatest crossroads of life and death in our world today. And so at one point, as a college student, that reality started to hit me. I was a student who felt compelled, and the only way I can explain it is it must have been the Holy Spirit, right? I was compelled to go pray in front of my local Planned Parenthood abortion facility just 1 hour a week with a program called Stand and Pray. This was initiated by an organization called the Brazos Valley Coalition for Life, a beautiful, peaceful, activist organization and interdenominational effort in my college town in Aggie Land, where I went to school at Texas A&M University. And I quickly came to pray for the women who were walking in there, even the workers, including a woman named Abby Johnson, who many of you are familiar with, someone that rose through the ranks of Planned Parenthood, started out as an abortion center escort, quickly at one point became the center's director, right? But I was mesmerized by the power of prayer. And then there was an opportunity to get trained by somebody to be a sidewalk counselor, right? Be somebody who would reach out with their words to the women going in and connect them with pregnancy help services. Many of these women that are entering these facilities have no idea that some of these services exist, right? Some of the services that you all provide. And so I just saw really like a blank check on the sidewalk to do good. That was the community that also birthed the very first 40 Days for Life campaign. If you're familiar with the 40 Days for Life effort, it is a 40-day prayer vigil that now happens every spring and fall. It started in Aggie Land and it's spread around the world, right? And when I experienced that campaign and the power of prayer, kind of putting away maybe the odd tactics and just focusing on prayer, focusing on connecting with women and men and praying for them, first of all, but also connecting them with resources, I thought to myself, wow, there is just something to this. I just saw so many miracles from, the effort of prayer. And then, of course, some of us that were trained to reach out with our words, it was like the icing on the cake, right? So prayer and work, it's just a miraculous combination. At one point, I guess I didn't get a clue that maybe I was called to this full time. I actually went to law school thinking I was going to be a pro-life litigator or lobbyist. I ended up joining 40 Days for Life National to help out for a couple of years on the national team as their campaign strategist, advising those prayer campaigns throughout North America for a couple of years. But at one point, I saw a need and felt the call to start Sidewalk Advocates for Life. I had the founder, David B. Wright's blessing to leave at one point and look at filling this need. And what we've sought to do in the 11 years that we've been around is to streamline sidewalk outreach methodology, right? That a lot of people sometimes will find some good sidewalk training. What we found is that, for a while earlier earlier really this century, right? A lot of groups were fizzling out because they didn't have infrastructure support behind them. And so we thought, what if we had this comprehensive training program that, tried to include every scenario that you could possibly experience on the sidewalk? And then we also offered ready-made tools and full-time staff support, really like 40 Days for Life had done for people who want to have a prayer presence in front of their facilities for 40-day periods at different points during the year, right? And so, and I think the other thing that we really tried to do is help people understand what sidewalk outreach or sidewalk advocacy, as we call it, right, is and is not. There's a lot of folks that when they go to an abortion facility, some of them, don't know what to do. Obviously, there's so many feelings around abortion. It's such a difficult issue. People are trying to sort out, how do we help women in crisis who are considering this, especially as people of faith and conscience. We know that every abortion decision, but like each one includes a crisis. Each one includes big questions of faith and big questions of the future. And so, we thought that maybe what we could do uniquely in the movement was provide this ready-made program that would help people of faith and conscience get out there, be able to answer those questions for themselves, and then really channel maybe even their righteous anger around abortion, their desire to help other people, though, even more so. We could help them find the words, find, the methodology to be able to see a difference in their communities, to help each and every woman who crossed their path, connecting them with pregnancy help resources, help workers who were present and needed to know that there was another way and another job even waiting for them, right? Now we connect with, and then there were none, Abby Johnson's abortion worker ministry to help those folks. But, when you help enough workers, when you help enough women, then it's hard for abortion facilities to stay open. And so the beautiful thing is that this is actually a mechanism by which we're seeing abortion end community by community as well. And it's all done with love. It's all done with peace and hope, everything that Christ gives us. And we have just such an opportunity when we go to the sidewalk to really do good and to really affect change. And that's what I'm most excited about.
Well, you've said that like it's always been that way, and it hasn't been. The many of folks that have been around pregnancy help movement for a long time have seen things on the sidewalk that were not loving and not caring, and certainly not consistent and collaborative in nature. They were much more confrontational, even some borderline, of course, obnoxious in many ways. And so, to me, that's one of the beauties that you've done, Lauren, is that you've really kind of given us the true picture of what can happen on the sidewalk, which literally can be that last moment where we have to engage with her before she accesses an abortion. So you've basically changed the sidewalk. So I want to commend you. It feels like it's been a lot longer than 11 years because you've been at this for a while, and you've done so many good things to kind of professionalize the opportunity. I know you introduced the vests. You really have the quality training that makes it happen. But I've described it to others as really being the love approach for the sidewalk. And of course, love approach is the work that was written originally by Peggy Hartshorn back in the early 90s. And it's kind of our signature outreach, which is all about 1 Corinthians 13, loving people through this conversation about their decision for their abortion. And in my mind, you've really brought that to the sidewalk. So how do you explain it to others when you really talk about what that engagement looks like?
Yeah. So, Jor-El, I can't remember when it was, but a few years ago, I feel like there was a moment where you and I compared notes, and we basically said, hey, what's being taught in heartbeat affiliated centers is also really kind of what we're teaching on the sidewalk, right? I think that we all rightly recognize that the greatest of these is love, that without love, we are a noisy gong or a clanging cymbal. We're not going to get very far. And it's love that moves people to truly what the gospel is. We want to bring Jesus to these women. But I think that the way that we bring people to Jesus is so important, right? We seek to be winsome, kind-hearted, truly attractive people on the sidewalk, people that we would want to talk to if we were in crisis, right? And so the way that we explain it in our training is the mom, baby, God model. So we have something called the compass and then something called the map. So the mom, baby, God is the compass, which I'll explain more here in a second. And the map is our 5-point method. And I tell people that, when you're trying to get from point A to point B, the compass kind of points you due north, and it's the map that tells you, okay, step by step by step, here's what you say, here's where you go next, right? It's your left or your right to get to your destination. So just generally, our compass, our mom, baby, God model really comes from the understanding that we as pro-lifers, we as people of faith and conscience, we have things in the so-called right or natural order. A mother puts her child before herself. Of course, God always comes first, right? So you could say that the right or the natural order is God, baby, mom. But a woman in crisis mode, a woman in self-preservation mode, considering abortion, tends to have all of that inverted. She's not even meaning to think about herself first. That's just kind of what happens, as many of you know, when you're in crisis, right? You're in self-preservation mode. You're thinking, I've got to get out of the situation. She's pushing baby to the recesses of her mind. She's pushing God even further away, because if she stops to think about what he might say about this, she might change her mind. And that scares her, because she's trying to reconcile present with future self. And when she looks at herself in the future, when she's considering, really this unexpected, yes, blessing, but this unexpected surprise, right? She's seeing her life go up in smoke. And so you and I have an opportunity to kind of step in the gap there and bridge the gap for her. And we do that not by going at her and saying, you're wrong, God comes first, and, how dare you be thinking about yourself before your baby, right? That's not going to get us anywhere. Just like Christ has met us in our great need, we need to run to where she is and how she's thinking. And so we encourage advocates first to start with mom. Mom is the one making the decision. If we don't reach her heart, then abortion doesn't end in that moment, because people are not going to hear what we have to say unless they know that we care, right? So we start with her and we say simple things like, if appropriate or if we're comfortable, we say, we love you. We care about you. We've got real help for you today. Tell us what it is that brings you here. How can we help you? And it's trying to identify the basic reason or set of reasons why they're there. And we found that as soon as we do that, her instinct is to become more maternal, turn back to herself, and reconsider the life of her child, which all of you, again, in the pregnancy help movement who've been doing this decades longer than those of us on the sidewalk, right? You know this so well, but I feel like it's this, a sidewalk folks that are a little bit late to the party or catching up with this understanding. And then what we find is that that's the key that unlocks the rest of the conversation. So then we can ask her, by the way, how far along are you? Oh, you're 8 weeks. Did you know your little one is doing backflips in your womb and sucking his or her thumb? And, we're painting a picture of life, something that the abortion facility surely won't do. And then if we have time, then we love to plant a seed of faith, asking her, do you have a faith? Do you pray? We've often found that faith-based conversations just tend to be better in a pregnancy center, right? If you kind of come at somebody with a whole lot of faith-based questions, we found that sometimes they can shut down. And there is kind of this misnomer that people on the sidewalk are going to proselytize or judge or yell at her, right? Now, we always say the Holy Spirit's the trump card, because of course, our ultimate prerogative is to get her into the arms of the great physician, is for her to know Jesus. But we find, just like our Lord modeled so well, is that when we run to fill the physical need, then her heart is more open to the spiritual. And that's really what love is all about, is love cares for that person standing right in front of you, their situation, what it is that brought them to the facility. Can we be the hands and feet of Jesus in showing her that we care for her too, not just her baby, right? Care for her situation. And then we go from there. And we just really are encouragers on the sidewalk with concrete resources behind us, thanks to really mostly the heartbeat centers that we partner with.
Well, it's one of the beauties that I've seen, Lauren. Like you said, we compared notes a while back, and you helped me understand that really what Sidewalk Advocates for Life is doing is essentially creating that pregnancy help scenario, but on the sidewalk. Like we know it when we've had the ability to fashion it without the tension that the sidewalk really suggests. The tension that she's literally going to step into an abortion clinic, right? So there's a little bit different tension on the sidewalk. But you've brought everything about the pregnancy center, all of the love, the compassion, the care, the concern for her into that moment on the sidewalk. So again, I just want to commend really the vision that you've had, the heart with which you've done it, and the team that's picked up and really been so successful at it. I just marvel at it. Not all of us are really equipped for that sidewalk type of an intervention, and we are grateful for those that are called to that, but do so in a way that models the love of Christ, that is I'm going to say aggressive, more than assertive, but at least is willing to step out and to seek that intervention versus waiting for it to come to us. And I know all of us are wrestling with a changing abortion landscape. I know you're in Texas, at least most of the time, right? And Texas, we're grateful for a wonderful pro-life state that it is, but abortions are still happening. And even though abortion clinics are closing, we just learned a few months ago about the closing of the largest one there in Houston. We know that the laws of Texas are far more pro-life than almost any other state in the nation. So things are changing. The landscape is changing, nationally. It's changing in specific states. Now, how do you really train your advocates to address the changing landscape of abortion?
Yeah, yeah. It's funny. I had a flashback just now when you asked that question. I remembered at somewhere between, I think it was February to, until the decision was handed down in June of 2022, right? The Dobbs decision that overturned the infamous Roe versus Wade abortion case. And I remembered in that interim, we went to all of our advocates in the so-called pro-life states, the states that we thought would ban or greatly limit abortion. And we said, get ready, because we know, you all know this so well in the pregnancy help movement, that we knew our work would not be over in these states. Women would still be leaving these states, our communities, for the next nearest abortion facility. It's not like because a Supreme Court decision was handed down that unexpected pregnancy was going to go up in smoke, right? And so we also knew, too, that the abortion industry would still be on the ground. A lot of people don't realize that Planned Parenthood still has a very strong presence in a lot of really the vast majority of our pro-life states. They have these so-called family planning centers, which we've always known to be abortion referral facilities. These are like heads of the dragon that are referring across state lines, that are connecting women with facilities 300 and 600 miles away. So we said to our folks after the leak at the Supreme Court, that decision was leaked. We knew for a few months it probably was going to go that direction. And we said, where are you going? Put eyes on where you're going next, because women are still going to be walking into these facilities. They will still need you. And I think in that transition, at the time, we may have had about 220 sidewalk teams. I think we lost 2 in the transition. And I was just so elated by that, because we knew that it was so important we be there. We also have found that maintaining a presence at our abortion referral facilities in the pro-life states, turnarounds or saves, which kind of the inside term here with sidewalk outreach, they're a lot easier. We have seen so many babies saved at abortion referral centers because we're able to say to the woman, hey, you know what? You can't hop on a plane today. You're not taking off until potentially tomorrow or the next day. Will you try, the services of the mobile unit here on site? Will you try the services of the Heartbeat Center down the street? I remember a few weeks after Roe was overturned, our team in Houston was still going out. Again, used to be the largest abortion facility in the Western Hemisphere. After Roe was overturned, it became the largest abortion referral center in America. But I think that day there were something like 18 turnarounds, right? And it was because women didn't know where to go and what this all was going to look like. And the beautiful thing was we were there to point them in a direction. And the vast majority of the women who boarded the mobile unit that day made a solid decision for life. And so there's an incredible opportunity here. Now, of course, we know that most abortions nowadays are being conducted, in a bathroom. People are ordering, mail order abortion causing drugs. And so we have had to think a little bit outside of the box as to how we continue to reach women in post-Roe America. And so, for example, we're getting ready to train a team of online advocates to go into chat rooms where women are asking, where can I get abortion pills? Or they're asking about other women's experience. And just like on the sidewalk, where our prerogative, of course, is love and understanding where she's at and connecting her with resources, we're able to do that virtually. And many of us on the national team, many of us in our local communities, we've gotten connected to women anyway, across the miles or on social media because of people knowing what we do. And so I think the idea here in post-Roe America is that the sidewalk is everywhere. And we at Sidewalk Advocates for Life, we're starting to kind of think more in terms of that obviously will always be the boots on the ground, seeking to cover, we cover about 1/3 of U.S. abortion facilities right now. The question is, can we cover all, at least all the uncovered of the 765 that are out there still? Can we continue to have a presence at these abortion referral centers? And then where else are women going? And can we still be there as the hands and feet of Jesus in this new era?
So that's a interesting thought. The idea that, I heard right before it was actually Texas led the way with the heartbeat bill, of course, that then prepares the way for Dobbs, the Dobbs discussion that you were highlighting. And I remember somebody actually in Texas saying, "Well, what are all the pregnancy centers going to do once the law changes?" And it's like, boy, how like misunderstanding and misguided that was of the reality of a half century of a culture of abortion in really invading our national psyche, right? The fact that women had only known abortion really at that point, as far as the generations that had grown up in that. So God bless you for continuing to seeing that in advance, and then being ready for the adjustment, and then being willing to step in and adapt. Like, that's one of the beauties of the sidewalk opportunity, because frankly some of our pregnancy centers are a little late to understanding that this is not just a brick and mortar conversation anymore, right? This is not just a physical location, but it's becoming a digital conversation as well. And I'm grateful that your team is making that kind of adaptation as well. And it's both important to be on the sidewalk, but also to be where she's having these other conversations as well. So in the last year, Lauren, as you've seen things change, and you might have spoken to this already, but have you seen changes that specifically in this past year? I mean, we're kind of there's a new administration, which means there's some new voices empowered. Some of those we've known from before, and some of it's back, but not necessarily back in the same way. But at the same time, you also have the opposite of that, which is really more vocal, more vicious, even volatile abortion industry. What have you seen in the last year from the sidewalk perspective?
Yeah, well, since Roe was overturned, we've seen two different administrations. And even though we're not a political organization, we are obviously affected by what goes on in the White House and Congress and beyond, right? And so these are First Amendment things that we're constantly dealing with. We're exercising, our rights, so to speak, to have peaceful conversations, to hand out literature. We do that within the confines of our First Amendment rights. I'll tell you, when we have one administration, we kind of tend to breathe a little bit of a sigh of relief on the sidewalk, right? Because, the previous administration, they were just looking for any reason to come after a pro-lifer, or they were looking for us to put, our toe over the line. One of the things that we really aim to do is to stay law-abiding, just so we can stay out on the sidewalk as long as possible and reach out to every eternal soul that's crossing our path, right? The previous administration loved to prosecute people under the Freedom of Access to Clinic Entrances Act. And even though we weren't doing anything overt to, run afoul of that law, at the same time, we knew that we were in a different climate, and we had to really make sure that we were following all those core values on the sidewalk that we have, to be peaceful, prayerful, loving, and law-abiding, so that we could continue doing what we were doing. And so it was a more tenuous time, I would say, a year ago. Now it feels like we have an administration that has our back, that appreciates the fact that we have First Amendment rights, that appreciates the fact that we care for women who are facing unexpected pregnancies, and care for their babies, and want to give women life-affirming solutions and a connection to the pregnancy help movement, And that's really the heart of who we are. We do crisis intervention. You all do ongoing crisis management. We're the people who hand people off to you guys. And so it's so important that we're continuously evaluating, our effectiveness and making sure that we're protecting our ministry out there. I always say that the sidewalk is a microcosm for the culture. When things heat up in the political world, then a lot of times we'll see them heat up on the sidewalk. I think it was right after Roe was overturned for the first time in our history, two of our volunteers got attacked physically. There was somebody who shoved somebody else, I think, who threw a punch. And I mean, in our 11-year history, those are literally the only two incidents, and it came from the other side, right? And so, even with 250 sidewalk teams to not be charged under the FACE Act, when we had an old administration that was just chomping at the bit to do so, that's miraculous too. But again, I think it also speaks to our national reputation, the training that we provide our volunteers, the legal support that we give them. When we started Sidewalk Advocates for Life, we said, not only do we want to streamline this, but we want to make sure that these saints on the front lines, these saints on the sidewalk who are seeking to connect to women with the amazing pregnancy help services that you all offer, we want to make sure they have the best of the best support and that they are encouraged to persevere until their abortion facility shuts down. And then when that one shuts down, they're willing to maybe go on to the next one and the next one, right? And so that's part of our culture over here, is to protect our people and make sure they can do the mission that God has given them.
Well, maybe that's one of the reasons why God's had you go to law school in advance, so you could really be on the right side of that conversation. I know we're having some national conversations about strategy and where the law is and the line of the law is. Certainly in the pregnancy help world, we're wrestling with attacks against abortion pill reversal, which you would think that a woman's right to continue her pregnancy should be in every single state. But we're seeing some aggressive approaches for that. So we can understand the desire to be law abiding. Because we want the law to stand for her as well, right? That's certainly our common hope and common goal. But you've seen, Lauren, the fact that our nation really is divided into really two halves, right? You have what I would call abortion states and life states, right? So which is familiar to our nation, because at one time we had free states and slave states, right? So you have states. So you've talked about the First Amendment, which is a federal conversation, but each of the abortion states are rather aggressive in their support for abortion, and really the shield laws that are coming in. Like, how does that affect anything on the sidewalk, or is it pretty similar to the way it's been at 50 years of Roe? Similar to that? Any differences there?
Yeah, I mean, the other thing that we have to stay abreast of are, our city ordinances, bubble and buffer zones. We have to sometimes work around those. Of course, again, we're law abiding. And then, of course, state laws vary from. So, I mean, we had one landscape before. Now we've got 50 that we've got to stay attentive to. And so, for us at any given moment, it's just making sure that our advocates understand the law and understand the type of client that's walking in there. Like the client in North Carolina is going to be different from the woman who's walking in Texas and the woman who's walking in Illinois. And so, in some of these states, we see very pregnant women who are walking into these facilities, and others, the cutoff is at 12 weeks. We've also become aware of situations where we think illegal abortions are going on, and we've had to report those to the, the entities that be, right. And it's just never a dull moment. But it can be tricky keeping up with 50 different landscapes.
I certainly understand that, and we know our pregnancy centers are typically enmeshed in one or the other. They're not typically straddling those things, but you get the pleasure of working across all of those lines and in a very effective way. So thank you for doing that. All right, let's talk about. It's not, unfortunately, you and I have had this conversation over the years. It's not always a wonderfully rosy connection between the local pregnancy center and the sidewalk counselors, and I think that's mostly because of the misperception of the pregnancy center. So I want to call that out and be intentional about that. So how can we build this relationship better? Like, give me some best case scenarios that you've seen of working hand in hand, pregnancy center folks and sidewalk folks.
Yeah. Well, we are just seeing a beautiful blossoming, a new springtime of collaboration between sidewalk folks, with our folks and with pregnancy centers. And look, I'll be the first to say I don't blame pregnancy centers for being hesitant at times to work with sidewalk folks because of what sidewalk counseling, so to speak, has meant through the years or been misunderstood to mean. And we've really been trying to be part of that sea change, both in what this is and what it's understood to be, right? And so I love it when we, start a new group in a new community, and we one of the first things we encourage is our sidewalk advocates to walk into the local pregnancy center with our pledge of integrity and showing them the document that we require every one of our volunteers to sign. And so many pregnancy centers have been able to take a deep sigh of relief and say, you know what, maybe this is the beginning of working together, right? Because I understand that pregnancy centers want to make sure that anybody who's referring to them or working hand in glove with them, that they share the same values, right? Because if you've got somebody being ugly out on the sidewalk and they're referring to the local pregnancy center, whoo, maybe you don't want those referrals, right? And so, again, because of the high standards that we have and what God has built over these 11 years, we tell sidewalk advocates, go in there proudly with the pledge of integrity. Tell them what you're doing and how it very well could be different from what's been done on that sidewalk before, and invite them to collaborate however they're willing to collaborate. And I just say that to, all of you who are in the pregnancy help centers, is that if you've got a local sidewalk advocate team, first of all, I assure you that we share the same values. And, there's kind of two main ways to work together. One is that you can just take referrals from the sidewalk, like, hey, we're referring to this, women's center or pregnancy center today, however you want to be designated, and we'll honor whatever you want us to, bring up on the sidewalk as far as your services. We love being that sales team for life for you, right? The other thing is that pregnancy centers can decide to have a sidewalk advocacy arm of their ministry. And that's what's really been cool at this point in history is, some pregnancy centers, understandably, they want to separate those volunteers either for the day or just, hey, this is our set of volunteers that goes to the sidewalk. This is our set of volunteers that goes to the center. We don't micromanage, what's signed in your center. Maybe you do have, certain requirements of your volunteers. We have kind of some basics over here, but again, they jive really well with what pregnancy centers usually require. And so maybe that is something you're called to. I'll give one quick example. One of our pregnancy center partners in, I believe it was Jackson, Mississippi, just prior to Roe being overturned, when they partnered with Sidewalk Advocates for Life, they saw client visits go up 5 times. And so that to me is miraculous. And that's not an anomaly. We hear of a great increase when there's some sort of partnership with Sidewalk Advocates, because again, you all are doing such a great job of, optimizing those Google searches and putting yourself out there in the community. And please, please, please keep doing that. But there's still a great population of women that somehow they don't know about or don't hear about your services. We get to be that sales team for you. And so, I think having a meeting, having a cup of coffee together, exchanging information, setting your terms as far as what's going to be most advantageous to get women over to your center. We welcome any and all of that. And my only thing is just, I hope you'll give us a chance. I think you'll be impressed with, the caliber of volunteers that we have. I'm biased, but I think they're just the best of the best. And we do hold people to a high standard over here. Rarely have we had to dismiss a volunteer, but we'll also hold the line if we need to, because that brand, and it's so much more than a brand, but those principles that we espouse on the sidewalk are so important to be able to accomplish the heart of the ministry that we've been called to.
That's excellent, Lauren. I really appreciate you kind of identifying that. And I like the fact that you're seeing a new blossoming of cooperation. I've said for a long time that um, pregnancy help happens in all kinds of places. It happens certainly in the centers. It happens in maternity homes. It happens in adoption stages. Those are potential affiliates with Heartbeat International, but it happens on the sidewalk. It happens in the doctor's office. It happens in the churches. It happens in other places. Pregnancy help is a spectrum that includes the sidewalk, and that we can't just as pregnancy center people talk about how intentional we are about reaching the abortion determined without considering the sidewalk, right? And looking for opportunities to partner with existing or maybe encourage them. Now, that's something that you mentioned. You're looking to continue to grow, right? You want more teams that are doing this. How can a local pregnancy center explore this opportunity, or maybe explore raising it up within the community if they're not willing necessarily to be that lead organization? How would you encourage them to help make that happen?
Yeah, well, it can be just as simple as going to our website, sidewalkadvocates.org. We always tell people that there's three, really, I guess now four ways to be a part of what God is doing to save lives and to end abortion on the sidewalk. And that is start, join, pray, give, right? And so, anyways, let me focus on the first two, start or join, right? Some of you, again, may be called to have a sidewalk advocacy arm within your own pregnancy help outreach. Some of you are called to partner with the existing group. Some of you are called to encourage others to maybe consider it. And so, maybe you can help start something in your community and then say, hey, let's work together as a team. Or again, at join, I guess from that perspective, it would be what's already going on in your backyard. Look at the abortion facilities, look at the Planned Parenthood facilities in your community. Are there people out there? Are they affiliated with us? Right? At least if they're affiliated with us, they're going to have certain standards that they have to abide by. They have about 5 hours of training that they have to go through, and so get to know what's going on in your community, and just see how you can encourage people the right direction.
So you mentioned, well, let me throw in the pray and the give part, right? Because if we're praying for people in our centers, let's also pray for our sidewalk counselors who are willing to step into such a challenging environment, not in a confrontational way, but in a loving and compassionate way. So we should always be praying. And if there are some centers who consider the opportunity to give to other outreaches that are similar to them, and sometimes it comes in the framing of a tithe, or hey, we've been blessed and we want to bless others. So I want to encourage you, if there's a sidewalk team that's active in your area that's helping touch lives, that to consider them as part of that outreach to give, or to really undergird and support what they're doing. Because if we're serious about, this is the conversation we hear often. Well, we really want to reach the abortion determined or the abortion minded. Well, there's very few women that are more so than those that are about to walk into an abortion clinic. So the sidewalk should be part of that consideration. And we can certainly connect, like you do, Lauren, with the concept of, if the local Google search isn't immediately referring them to the local center, Option Line has that same posture. Like, we hope that the net of marketing catches them, but if that doesn't happen and we do, then our goal is to turn right around and connect them with that local center. So we certainly can reach that. So how can we pray for you specifically, Lauren?
Well, gosh, what a question. That's a beautiful question. It's really a burden, I know, on my heart as the founder and the leader. Um, it's a burden on all of our national teams' hearts that we cover all uncovered facilities eventually in the United States. Not because we feel a need in and of ourselves to be there, but because there's nobody there, and because God's people should be there. God's people should be there. And so we're working every day to get in front of more facilities, and to really, if we can all pray too, that people in pro-life states would recognize the opportunity and the call that they have to still be there for the women of their community. Just pray for us as we move forward with, all of those things on our hearts. And also too, with the understanding that in post-Roe America, the sidewalk is everywhere. We're working on some pretty exciting projects right now. Nothing that I can announce today, but different ways that we can help the common everyday pro-lifer have a conversation with their friend or family member who may be considering abortion. Because in today's day and age, we are all sidewalk advocates, and we all need to be able to have really what is the most important conversation aside from faith on the earth today, right? There's no greater conversation that we can have than with a mother who is in crisis, and where the life of her child hangs in the balance. And again, I don't need to tell you all that, right? You have those conversations every day. And then the last thing I'll just say is that you guys, you have no idea how much we love you. I mean, we are your biggest fans. We are always here cheering you on, and it really is our greatest joy to make you known and to make Christ known. And so, just as we continue to move forward in this journey, please continue to reach out to us and let us know how we can best market really what God is doing through you. If you have an update in your center, if you have other things going on that we can mention out on the sidewalk, we love to just sing your praises out on the sidewalk and really help her to understand that there's a place of refuge nearby. We know, of course, that Christ is the great physician, but the body of Christ is in our pregnancy centers today, right? you are the hands and feet of Jesus in the bricks and mortars out there. And so we are just so excited to be a gateway to your life affirming resources. And so just continue to let us know how we can best work together as we move forward in this great mission that God has given us.
Well, thank you, Lauren. And community, right? This is ultimate. We're a
Mhm.
pregnancy help community. That includes the folks on the sidewalk. That includes the folks in the pregnancy help organizations, the brick and mortar, whether they're centers or maternity homes, adoption agencies. All of us together making it happen. So I appreciate the opportunity and the reminder to collaborate together. We're working on something called the High Risk Response Network, Lauren, where we're encouraging centers to be more available outside of their brick and mortar hours. And hopefully that makes them more accessible to the sidewalk folks as well. Now, when you have some other things to announce and some of the projects that you're doing, will you come back and let us know?
100%. I'd love to. Can't wait to share. So, yeah.
We look forward to it. Thanks, Lauren, for being a part of this. Thank you. And thanks to all of the teams, 250 nationwide. We need 250 more. Actually, we need 500 more, right, to get to the fully covered folks. So we'll be praying for that, praying with you and praying for you.
Thank you. Thank you, Jor-El, and all of you. Keep up the great work. We love you and appreciate you.
Thanks so much, Lauren. I will link to Sidewalk Advocates for Life in the show notes so that people have an easy way to connect with you guys. I'll also add some information on the love approach, since that was something we talked about. I hope our listeners would consider sharing this with this conversation with someone that they know. Maybe somebody who has a heart for the mission but hasn't even yet been involved in it directly. Maybe this is their calling to start a Sidewalk Advocates for Life group in their area and connect with the pregnancy help organization too. So great to hear about collaboration. We hope that continues. And Lauren, we hope to have you on again in the future as we hear about more of what you guys are doing. So again, listeners, please subscribe, please share, and thanks for listening to this episode of the Pregnancy Help Podcast.